A lion with an arrow buried deep in his chest stumbles into a camp, a dusk blood soaking his fur. Breath, ragged eyes burning with something older than pain. People scream, scatter, reach for weapons. But he does not roar, he does not strike. He walks straight through the fear and lays down at the feet of a child, frozen in place, heart pounding, with a name he hasn't spoken in years. A name he buried the day they took his best friend from him. 6 years of silence, 6 years of waiting. And now the wild has returned, not with fury, but with memory and a question unspoken. How does something lost this long still find its way home? Each morning, the boy rose before the others, walked barefoot through the dust to the edge of the camp where the grass met the open plain and stood still as if waiting for something to step out of the wind. He fed the chickens, watched the sky swept the same worn path near the water barrels. Not because it needed sweeping, but because that was where they used to sit together, a lion cub and a boy. The dust held the shape of those memories like soft footprints. Only he could see. He spoke little, but listened always to the silence between things, to the rustle of leaves, to the way the wind sometimes sounded like breathing he kept. A small carved figure hidden in his blanket. A lion smoothed by years of fingers tracing its mane. No one asked about it anymore. No one noticed how he paused before meals, how he left scraps at the edge of the fence, how sometimes he stared into the fire, like it might speak to him. The world had moved on, but part of him never did. He smiled when spoken to, worked when asked, laughed when others laughed, but there was a weight in his chest that never lifted, a quiet place where something used to live. Something wild, something warm, something with golden eyes and a heartbeat. He had memorized long ago, something that no one else seemed to miss, something he still waited for in dreams, whispering its name into the night like a promise he refused to break. Moyo. He remembered the dust in the air that morning, the sharp ache in his chest as they led Moyo away, the lion still young, confused, turning back again and again, eyes searching for the boy who wasn't allowed to follow. The adults spoke, gently said, words like safety, wildness, nature, but none of it made sense, not when everything inside him was screaming, not when Moyo's cries faded into the distance like something being torn from the earth he had run until his legs gave out, collapsed in the tall grass, sobbing with fists clenched against the sky. He waited there until night fell, waited for the sound of paws, for a rustle in the dark, for any sign that Moyo had turned back. But nothing came. In the days that followed, he stopped speaking, refused to eat, barely slept. He walked to the edge of the camp every evening, calling the name over and over until his voice cracked, then softer, then only in his thoughts until it became a whisper that lived beneath his breath and never fully left. He began to drift in school, forgot to answer when spoken to, stared for hours at nothing. People said he'd grow out of it, that boys forget faster than they think, but grief carved deep and quiet, and the years only widened the space where Moyo used to be. The lion must have changed too, no longer a cub, perhaps no longer gentle, perhaps wild and gone and unreachable. The boy didn't know, and not knowing was its own kind of wound, so he learned to carry silence like a second skin. Laughter sounded thinner, his footsteps lighter, as if afraid to wake something that might still be sleeping in him. Each year passed like wind over stone, shaping him softly, painfully, into someone who remembered everything and said nothing. Let's take a short pause in the story. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? Has there ever been a moment in your life when someone, a person or even an animal, remembered you after years apart? A glance, a sound, a touch that said, "I never forgot you." If stories like this touch something in you, make sure to follow. There's so much more ahead, and it only gets deeper from here. It started moments before the scream, with the sound of feet running the air, shifting, a ripple of tension passing through the camp. And then the shout, "Lion, lion, lion," and the world cracked open, people yelling, dust rising, chaos and fear. And he stood, frozen, staring at the edge of the tents. And then he saw it, limping, dragging itself forward through the dust, a lion, broken, bleeding, massive and slow. and yet something in the shape of its body, the way it moved, the way it scanned the crowd. Not like a predator, but like something searching, something desperate. The boy's chest tightened, as if something ancient had gripped his ribs. He heard someone call his name, someone shouting for him to run, but he didn't. He couldn't, because all at once his body remembered things before his mind did, remembered warmth and weight beside him, remembered fur against his cheek, remembered laughter in the tall grass and paws the size of his hands when he was small, and his breath caught not in fear, but in recognition. Could it be? Was it even possible? How could something lost for so long return? Could memory survive the wilderness, the pain, the wildness, and still come back to him? He felt a storm rising inside, a pull to run and hide, and an ache to reach out all at once. What if it wasn't Moyo? What if it was? What if he didn't remember him? What if he did, and was dying and had come back only to fall here in front of him? The questions screamed through him, but one truth rose louder than the rest the lion had come to. This place, to this camp, to this exact moment, and their eyes had met, and in that single locked gaze, the world folded down to two broken hearts, reaching for each other across the silence of 6 long years, and without a word, without a plan, without knowing why his feet moved toward the wild, toward the blood, toward the memory that refused to die. The space between them felt endless and impossibly small, the lion dragging each step with effort, ribs heaving, eyes half closed from pain, yet still fixed on the boy, as if every ounce of strength was carrying him towards something he needed more than breath. The boy stood motionless, dust swirling around his ankles, his hands shaking, breath shallow. The sounds of the camp distant, muffled, like he was underwater. The lion stopped just a few feet away, and for a moment time itself seemed to pause. The boy smelled the dry copper tang of blood mixed with the faint, earthy scent he hadn't realized he remembered. But now it came rushing back like a wave, like the scent of sun-warmed fur in the morning, like the dusty paws curled beside him in sleep. He blinked and his vision blurred, not from fear, but from the sudden, crushing recognition. And then it happened, a sound so soft it might have been imagined, a low rumble from deep in the lion's chest. Not a growl, not pain, something else. Something that brushed against memory like a hand in the dark, and the boy whispered it once, Moyo, and at that name the lion's ears flicked just slightly, and he stepped forward again, faltering his legs, trembling, then folding beneath him, and he collapsed, but not away from the boy, toward him, slowly, deliberately, as if choosing, and laid his head in the boy's lap, the weight of it so familiar, so impossible, so true. The boy let out a sob, low and broken, as he cradled that massive head, his fingers finding their way through the blood-matted mane, not afraid, not confused, just aching with everything that had been lost and now found. Moyo shuddered. Once, then stilled his breath. Loud and heavy, the boy leaned over him, forehead resting against fur, whispering the name again and again, not to remind the lion, but to remind himself that this was real, that love had survived, that something wild and beautiful had found its way back. Through all the silence, through all the years, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the fear, not the wounds, not the questions. Only this impossible reunion written in the quiet between two heartbeats. In the days that followed, the camp moved softer around them. Voices lowered, footsteps light, as if afraid to disturb something sacred. The veterinarians came, worked quietly, removed the arrow, cleaned the wound, stitched what they could. But healing came not just from medicine. It came from the boy's hands brushing gently through Moyo's fur, from the way he spoke to him. Not like a beast, not like a patient, but like a friend returned from the dead. The boy brought meat wrapped in leaves, whispered stories, while the lion rested beside him. Sometimes Moyo would lift his head at the sound of the boy's laugh, a sound the camp hadn't heard in years. Once he placed his paw beside the boy's bare foot, rough against soft, old against young, and the boy smiled. Not the forced, polite smile adults give, but something real, something full and warm. The lion followed him at a slow pace around the edge of the camp, never too far, never too close, as if learning him all over again. And the boy began to hum again when he worked small, simple tunes from their time before his voice, finding confidence with each passing day. The scar on Moyo's chest faded, but the fire returned to his eyes. His strength returned, not in roars or leaps, but in the way he stood. Taller, lingered, longer, leaned gently into the boy's side. When resting at night, they sat beneath the same tree where once a cub had slept, curled beside a child, and now a lion and a boy shared silence, heavy with memory, but free of pain. People stopped asking questions. They simply watched, some with something like envy, because what stood before them was not a miracle, not luck. It was love in its oldest form, fierce, unspoken, and unbreakable. The boy no longer looked out at the horizon for something lost. He looked into golden eyes beside him and saw that nothing truly precious ever disappears. It only waits, and when it returns, it does not knock. It simply lies down beside you and says without a sound, "I never left." Some bonds need no words. They pass through years, silence, fear, and distance, like a quiet current beneath the surface. Because true connection never fades. It simply waits patiently for the moment it is needed most to return and heal. All that was broken, all that was lost. And in that healing, both hearts find a new life born from the old. A promise kept without sound, without haste. Just the steady pulse of love coming home.